Do you have a big interview coming up? Or are you job searching, hoping to have a big interview soon? If so, this presentation is for you. My name is Amanda with the Workforce Centers of South Central Kansas. And today I will go over general tips and tricks to how you can ace your next interview, but also a software tool called Big Interview, hence the title of this course, and how to use it to prepare for your big day. What exactly is Big Interview? It is an online tool that combines a proven curriculum of video lessons with artificial intelligence-based virtual practice to help job seekers improve their interview skills and increase their likelihood of landing a job. It's a tool you can use directly from your home or anywhere you have computer access. All you have to do is create you an account. The first step would be to go to this URL exactly, kansasworks.biginterview.com/. Once you get to the website, you do have to register for your account by entering your first name, last name, email, and a preferred password. Once you've done that, you can begin to log into your account with the email and password you created. And then you're ready to start practicing. Once you have created your account, you can then go to your dashboard and it'll give you the option to do a fast track learning process or a more extensive process. And so if you go to continue, I had started a fast track here. It gives all kinds of lessons, types of interviews, even some quizzes throughout. And it breaks it down like what to wear, analyzing job descriptions, etc. And so here I clicked on the learn at the top part. And so again, the fast track looks like it's 16 video lessons. If you do the more extensive one, it's going to be about 50 video lessons. So the nice thing is, you're able to watch this from the convenience of your own home, wherever you have the computer access. And you can also look at more specialized things. Here's some interview playbooks. Maybe you're a new graduate or you have some disabilities or neurodivergent, overqualified, an introvert, etc. And so you can kind of check out videos that relate to your special situation that may be impacting you and possibly making it a little bit more challenging, or maybe making you not feel so confident about interviewing. You can also click on the practice tab. This would allow you to click practice interviews. This is where you can actually do a mock interview. It will record you on video. And at the end, that artificial intelligence software will kind of analyze your recording. You can also do interview roulette, so you don't know exactly what they're going to ask you, but they will ask you some random questions to kind of keep you on your toes. As you see, if we wanted to continue recording here, we would just hit start recording to answer that. You can even look at different question sets. This is probably my favorite part of the tool. You can go with some general interview questions, or possibly you want to search for questions in your industry. Some people have very specialized skills, like an architect, for example. And so this may give you some ideas of, what kind of questions might be asked in that industry, etc. And so that can help, as well as answering questions by competency. So maybe you want to know what kind of questions they might ask you that have to do with conflict management, for example. Even if you're looking at getting into a school, for example, there's also admissions interview questions, government and veterans questions as well. Like I mentioned before, you can do some practice interviews and you would actually record yourself at the end. It would analyze your scoring. So I intentionally tried to miss a few of them up just to see exactly what it would do. And so it will rate you on your pace of speech, your filler words, vocabulary, power words, count your pauses, your tone, the length, volume, lighting, all of that. So it's a pretty neat tool overall. It doesn't necessarily critique the content of the message so well. Still recommend having somebody else look at that to give you some feedback on how exactly you responded to those answers. The nice thing is with this, whether you want to just have it for yourself to go back and review and reflect on, you can even send this out to other people, whether that's a friend or family member, or maybe you're working more closely with a case manager and would like to send that over to them to get their professional feedback. And so that's also an option. Besides, the interviewing, this is really just a bonus tool. They also have a resume option on here and some resume content. That concludes my live demonstration of the software. I do encourage you to get in there and explore hours and hours and hours worth of content and feedback and things that you can use to help you prepare and feel more confident. I do want to provide you a little bit of information on how you can prepare for your next interview as well, though. So I will go ahead and get started with that. The first thing you're going to want to do is your research. One of the very first questions they will ask you generally is, what do you know about us? Since this is one of the most common questions, you definitely want to have done your research beforehand. Places you can do that research, the company website, social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Google News, Glassdoor. Look at all of them. Try to go through there and get a real good idea if the company is going to be a good fit for you as well. So when you have this interview, it is two-sided if you're going to be a good fit for them and if they're going to be a good fit for you. So also try to think of questions that you would genuinely want to know when you're at your interview, because most likely one of the last questions is, what questions do you have for me? And it looks bad if you do not have any questions. You're going to actually impress them if you do have questions and they can tell from your questions that you have done your research. Some general questions so that you can have some in your back pocket just in case, if you can't get any that are more customized, might be, what do you like most about working here? How will I be introduced to the job, or will there be training? What is the biggest challenge I may face in this position? And how is this position evaluated? Or what are the performance goals? You should walk into the interview looking as put together and professional as possible. So that means getting organized and possibly leaving some things behind. One thing I do recommend is getting you a folder or a portfolio of some kind. This is where you would keep anything that you may need to bring to the interview with you, including things like cover letter, resume copies, identification, examples of your work, letters of recommendation, and even a thank you card in which hopefully you will address and hand to them at the end or put in the mail at the end. Some items that you should not bring include a purse or other baggage. You really don't want to have to be carrying and sifting through a lot of things in the interview process. A phone. I know we tend to need to keep our phones on us. And so if you're unable to leave it behind, make sure it is at least on silent and not on vibrate, and avoid coats if possible. Know exactly where you are going, who you're meeting with, and be sure to show up early. So you may want to not only map out the address, but possibly even drive by the location ahead of the interview day. This way you can account for traffic, construction, etc. as well at the time of the interview. Ideally, you want to arrive to the location about 15 to 30 minutes early, but you do not want to walk into the building until approximately the 10 to 15 minute mark before the appointment time. You don't want to look too anxious. If it is a virtual interview, which is becoming more and more popular these days, I would recommend entering the virtual room about 5 minutes before the interview. But keep in mind, it does take a minute to get things loaded, and there could be possibly computer delays, etc. So I do recommend logging on in plenty of time in advance to address any of those issues that could possibly occur. An important part of preparing for an interview, I think, is understanding the type of interview that you might walk into. Most people are familiar with the one-on-one interview, so won't focus there. However, a telephone interview, I'm always surprised at how many people have never had one before. Sometimes with a telephone interview, you know exactly that you're going to be getting a phone call this day and this time, and they're going to be asking me some questions. Otherwise, sometimes it does happen when they call just to see if you are available to answer a few of their questions. If you are looking for work, you should always be prepared for this phone interview. One thing to do is to kind of screen your calls. So if it is something that is not already scheduled, I would definitely, if you're not sure who is calling, let it go to voicemail. That also means that your voicemail needs to be set up and you want it to be a professionally sounding voicemail. Do remove any distractions you may have, TV, animals, children, etc. Be aware of your tone, your pitch, your inflection, your pronunciation, and your rate of speech. The only way that you can convey, this is enthusiasm, is through those means. And so they can't see your body language. And so you do want to have a little bit of excitement. So you definitely don't want to be laying down, having just woke up, etc. I do encourage you to stand up, look in the mirror. That way you can also see yourself smile. You may even want to actually dress for the interview. This can also help with you sounding more confident as well. A panel interview is pretty standard these days, and that's where you would interview with multiple people. And normally it's about 3 to 5 interviewers, but could be more. You want to make sure you make eye contact with each individual. And while this may make you more nervous, it does actually give you a more fair opportunity. Usually they're wanting to get, an idea if you would work well with other departments, etc. So try not to let it rattle your nerves too much. It is actually very normal to have an interview now with multiple people. A group interview, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite. It is where you would have an interview with several other people that are competing for the same job in which you have applied for. And in this type of interview, they're generally trying to see how you interact with others, your confidence, aggressiveness, politeness, teamwork, etc. They may be doing it as a time saver. Maybe they're hiring more than one person, or maybe they've had trouble getting applicants past that interview stage in the past, possibly because, maybe they're not quite as honest about the job description as they should be. And so then people aren't interested once they find out what the job really is, or maybe there's some other reason that is causing this challenge for them. So in an effort to save time, they may get a group of people together and kind of weed out the people that may be interested to then take them on to the next step. I see the group interview rarely, and usually when I do, it tends to be sales environments, but not to say that you wouldn't see this in any other type of environment as well. During a task-oriented interview, they were going to ask you to perform a function of the job. Example, as a facilitator, they may ask you to teach something. A forklift operator, they may ask you to drive a forklift. Salesperson, they might ask you to sell a pen. whatever the case is, just make sure that you dress appropriately for the interview. And especially if you know you're going to be performing a task-oriented interview, think about that function of the job as well, to make sure that you're appropriately dressed. You wouldn't want your tie to get stuck in a machine, for example. The other method of interviewing that is now more and more popular ever since the pandemic is going to be a video interview. In the past, before the pandemic, I pretty much referred to them as Skype interviews, but now people are using Zoom and other call platforms. So it could be one of the various platforms that the company uses. During this process, you still want to make sure that you have a professional username. Free yourself from any distractions, TV, animals, children, tidy up your workspace. Think about what is in that background of the video view. And even when we talk about animals, I know there was a cat, for an example, jumping on the back of a chair during one video interview. So animals that maybe you wouldn't normally think would be a distraction could potentially be one. So kind of think outside of the box and make sure you've got an area that'll be completely free from distractions. Dress appropriately from head to toe as well. I use this picture generally to ask the question, are these people dressed appropriately for an interview? And almost always I get the answer yes, and I would agree. And the main reason that I actually really use this photo is to demonstrate body language. This guy on the far end in the khaki pants, he's a little bit more slouched, a little bit more relaxed. And so even though he is dressed appropriately, perception is also in that body language as well. In addition to, some of them are using phones or iPads. I see one lady, it looks like she's looking at papers. So even when you are in the lobby waiting to be called back, I would encourage you to have your phone put away and iPads, etc. Interview attire for men and women are practically the same. You really don't want to take away from you, so you want to try to stick with some solid colors, nothing too busy. A coordinated blouse, conservative tie, for example, moderate shoes in terms of heel height, closed toe. Make sure you wear dark colored socks and professional shoes for men. You just don't want white socks kind of breaking up your outfit there. Limit your jewelry when you're nervous. Sometimes our bracelets, for example, will be banging on the desk. Make sure you have a neat and professional hairstyle. Go easy on the makeup and perfume, colognes and aftershave. Make sure your nails are trimmed and neat, manicured. And also bring that portfolio or briefcase. Business casual versus business professional. So business professional is going to be more of the corporate suit, for both males and females over here. And if you're debating on what to wear to an interview, I always go by this kind of rule of thumb. If you were to walk in there on a typical day, if they're in a suit and tie, then you need to wear a suit and tie to the interview. If they're in more of this business casual look, slacks, cardigan, sports jacket, blouse type of attire, a little bit more casual attire, then you could probably get away with business casual attire at the interview, but you still may want to step it up a notch and do more of the business professional since it is an interview. I'm kind of more along the lines of, for an interview, I'm going to dress more of the business professional myself. And so this also, I want to throw this in here, goes for job fairs too. When you go to a job fair, this is the first time that they are meeting you and you're presenting yourself. And so ideally you want to be wearing no less than business casual to business professional. There are a few exceptions if you are going to be in construction. Maybe you're not dressing in business casual, you've got jeans on, etc. Or if you're working at a trendy store in the mall, maybe you're wearing their attire. So take it as it fits here. But the general rule of thumb is going to be, you're going to want to wear somewhere between business casual and business professional. and make that kind of determination off of what their everyday attire is, and if you want to dress that one step above to kind of set you apart. I'll cover now more specific questions that you'll encounter potentially at an interview and what we can do to help you prepare for that. So before we get started, I generally give a little pop quiz. I know you guys aren't going to be able to respond to me, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask these questions and kind of give you the answer here. So when does the interview start? I get a lot of times, 5 minutes before or whenever you walk in. It's actually whenever you pull into the parking lot. Most places have video cameras, etc. And so I have heard stories about people personally cutting off the person that's going to interview them in the parking lot, as well as somebody that got sick in the parking lot, but then a beer can rolled out from their car. So you do want to be aware that they are already watching you as soon as you pull in and you are on. So the next thing would be, who should you be nice to? Everyone, of course. So don't forget to be patient and courteous to the receptionist or anybody you meet. And also remember not to bring those purses or bags, put your phone away, and just sit quietly and take a few deep breaths until you are called back. Some common interview questions include, tell me about yourself. This is likely one of the first times you'll have to market yourself, and they are not asking about your marital status, religion, hobbies, age, or disabilities. In fact, disclosing these items puts them in an awkward position and could become a legality for them if you were to disclose this and they weren't to hire you. So do tell why you applied. Talk to them about how your past experience relates or how your education is relevant or your other skills and characteristics that would make you a good fit for this position. It's 30, 60 seconds of just kind of giving them an idea of why you are interested and how you are a good fit. Why do you want to work for our company? Of course, this answer would change from person to person, and your answer would even be different per job that you are applying to. So I'm going to give you kind of a general answer for this. And what you want to do is you want to build a bridge between you and the company. In other words, a genuine connection. While it may be for money or the benefits you've heard that you can take advantage of, the child care reimbursement or the discounted phone or whatever it may be, that's not the things that they want to hear. They want to hear about how you're passionate, how maybe you've had experience with a company before and you really like how they pride themselves on their customer service, whatever it may be. But think more about those intrinsic motivators rather than those external things that just benefit you. They may ask, why should we hire you? Again, this is an opportunity to sell yourself, reiterating why you would be a good fit for the job. Connect the dots for them by referring to the job description. Strongly recommend printing that job description out for any job you apply to so you can revert back to it to specifically prepare for a question like this. Being able to tie things back to the job description is definitely going to be able to connect the dots for the employer and how you would be a good fit. So think about the problem that they have and how you would be a solution, and avoid just throwing out random things about yourself. Because if, you say, I'm a hard worker, I'm, always on time, yada, 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 doesn't really mean anything unless you're able to say, I'm a really hard worker. When I was at this place, X, Y, and Z happened. Okay. So make sure that you are able to connect those dots. Have you ever disagreed with your boss? Disagreements are okay. And they want to know that you've had disagreements. It shows that you're able to be self-aware, acknowledge, take ownership, and that you're honest. What you don't want to do, though, is ever badmouth previous employers or supervisors. And so recommend sticking with minor disagreements, because sometimes some things may still not sit well with us. And when we talk about them, we let the cat out of the bag. So think about the minor thing, make sure it ends on a positive note, make sure you are talking about the situation with respect, ethics, integrity, and honesty. What are your strengths and weaknesses? As mentioned just a moment ago about printing out that job description, find something in that job description that you're really good at. And so when they ask you the strengths question, use that rather than just some random thing. When it comes to the weakness, think less is more, point out something professional, but you're going to actually describe how you're working at becoming stronger in that area. If you've been given any of the advice that I previously had gotten when I was job searching, it was always, make your weakness, turn it into a strength or a positive thing. And so typically, and this is a kind of tried out example, HR professionals everywhere, I've heard it, is I take a little bit longer to get things done because I, have really strong attention to detail and I just want to make sure I get it right. Well, me personally had that backfire on me. And so that's something that I would never use again. And the HR people, like I said, they've heard that one over and over and over again. And so you may not say it exactly like that, but a lot of people use something very, very similar. I'm going to give you a suggestion for another way you can tackle this with an example here. And so this is true life to me. Organization doesn't come naturally to me. Okay. So my version of how I might word this is organization doesn't come naturally to me, but I have found that if I keep an Outlook calendar, I get me a really good organizational system going, and I schedule time into my week to kind of reorganize or stay organized, that I meet all of my deadlines and I stay a whole lot less stressed. So I didn't tell you I can't be organized. In fact, I told you the things that I do to stay organized. Another example. I'm not as proficient in Excel as I'd like to be, but I'm currently taking classes at the Workforce Center. I'm also watching some YouTube videos, and I started doing my home budget in Excel just to give me some practice and some everyday routine in it. Again, pointing out the things that you are doing to become stronger or better in that area. And so that's the way that I would recommend that whatever your weakness is, at least pick out a few things that you are doing to become better or to improve that weakness of yours. What are your salary expectations? We all know whoever talks about money first usually loses. So you want to try to put this back on the employer. What you would actually say would be something like, what would be the salary or salary range you would normally pay for someone with my experience for this position? And then hopefully that gives them an opportunity to give you what their starting pay is, or, when they normally evaluate for possibly a raise, and for you to determine if that's going to be a good fit for you or not. And if it's not, then you might say, well, I couldn't accept anything less than whatever that amount is. And at that point is when negotiations can happen. Always wait for the employer to ask you about salary. Never ask what the pay is. A lot of times I know they don't really disclose it in the job descriptions anymore. So generally you're going to wait for the employer to present what the salary is, or they would ask you this question and you flip it back to them. Most interview questions, however, are behavioral-based questions. So the questions I just prepared you for were some general basic interview questions. I'm going to tell you now how you should answer the behavioral-based questions. There is a formula. The formula is the STAR method. That's situation, action, result. So you'll outline the situation or give kind of the background story. You'll describe the action you took or what skills you used, and then what was the final result or the outcome, the learning of your action, if you're able to quantify this with numbers or percentages. Behavioral-based questions generally have kind of themes or competencies in which they are trying to get you to describe how you've used those competencies or been successful. And so the few in particular that I know of that I generally prepare for is they're probably going to ask me something about initiative, conflict, communication, some type of mistake or error, my time management, or my ability to adapt. So initiative would be like going above and beyond, doing something outside of your normal scope of job duties. They may ask in terms of conflict, how you resolved a conflict with a coworker, supervisor, or customer, or how your communication skills have also been with a coworker, customer, boss, etc. Or a time that you've made a specific mistake and how you handled that situation, or about your ability to juggle multiple projects, multitask, and your ability to be flexible and adapt, etc. So here's some examples of what the questions might look like under those themes. So for initiative, for example, they might ask, tell me about a time you completed a task without being asked. My response may be, well, when Susie was gone unexpectedly, we actually normally would do this, but because she wasn't there to complete this part of the task, I went ahead and did that. My supervisor thanked me later for just jumping in and doing what needed to be done so that we didn't have any interruptions in service. And I give this to you as a real general example, but it has to be something that you don't do on a day-to-day and that you're specifically able to point out, when this occurred, what you did, what was that result. Same thing with conflict here. They might ask you, tell me about a time you handled a difficult customer. You're going to give that situation, the action, the result. Communication. Describe a time you succeeded at work because of your ability to communicate. And usually this is where people mess up, is they forget to remember that we're ending on a positive note. We're talking about a time you succeeded. And really all of your answers to these questions should be something that does end on a positive note. Even if maybe it starts off with a negative thing that happened, think of how you can end on a positive note with this. As an error example, it might be, give me an example of the time you made a significant mistake. And with this question specifically, I would not only tell what mistake I made and own that mistake, okay, because they're checking if you're able to be accountable. But I would also tell how I fixed the mistake. I would tell, what I learned from the mistake and what I'll do so that the mistake never happens again. Those would kind of be some of the components that I would make sure that I have within that answer. For time management, tell me about a time you juggled multiple projects at one time. Adaptability, tell me about a time you had to stop what you were currently doing and complete another task with little to no warning. So that's just seeing, how flexible and adaptable you are. A lot of times, our stories may even have more than one of these themes or competencies involved in them. For example, a story might sound something like this. When I was working at McDonald's, we were extremely short-staffed. A busload of students came in from their game. I'd been cross-trained to work the cash register and the fryers. Normally, I was just a cashier, but because we were short-staffed, I went ahead, I was flipping fries and taking orders, and we got through the busload of students in 20 minutes. My supervisor thanked me for just jumping right in and doing what needed to be done to serve our customers. And so with that, there's initiative. Maybe you weren't exactly asked, but you knew how to do it. And so, you just did what needed to be done, as well as There's some multitasking there, flipping fries and taking orders. So we may not be asked all of these questions. And of course, you're not going to repeat the same story twice. But if you can begin to think about stories that fit into these categories, it's going to help you pull out some of these stories out of your bag when you get to the interview. It will have already kind of jogged your memory of some things that you might be able to use if you get a question about initiative or conflict or communication, time management, adaptability, or an error you've made. And so these are just some general questions. The way that they ask it to you may be completely different, but if you can ask yourself, what is the root of the question, or what competency are they trying to see that I've mastered? That may help you in answering that question. Last but not least, you are going to want to send a thank you to express gratitude for their time and your interest in the position. Generally, I would say you want to send this thank you card or email. It could be an email within 24 hours. Typically, wait 2 weeks before attempting contact unless they've told you anything sooner. And you can always ask for feedback as well once you do attempt contact. It might sound something like, if they tell you that they did find somebody else for the position, you could say, I do want to thank you for your time. More than anything, I just want to learn from the situation. Is there any feedback that you may have for me so that I can improve for the next time? And express your interest that, you're still very interested in the company or another position if something comes up that they feel would be a good fit. Take time to mentally process how the whole interview went, so that way you can also make those changes for your upcoming interviews. So one other thing here, just to touch base on that thank you card or email. In the beginning, we talked about that portfolio and taking a thank you card with you. You could bring one partially kind of completed. And before you leave the interview, you could address it and personalize it a little bit more, maybe with something that you guys talked about or whatever. Hand it to the receptionist at the end or throw it in the mailbox immediately. So that way it'll get to them within that 24 to 48 hours there. That really wraps up our big interview presentation. So I do encourage you to use the big interview tool, because it's going to go a lot more in depth than what I went through. Hopefully I've given you enough to kind of work with or to chew on, if you will. But using that tool is going to give you the additional practice that you're going to want to take advantage of so that you can feel more confident before your next big interview. Thank you so much for your time, and you have a wonderful day.